And if Trump wins, it will be a disaster not only for the American people, but he will be supporting right-wing governments and right-wing movements all over the world. It could be, worst case scenario, that after 250 years of modern democracy, more or less, that we're coming to an end to that.
How old were you when you first got into politics, and what motivated you to do so?
Well, when I first got actively involved, I was pretty young. I was a student at the University of Chicago in my early 20s, got involved in the civil rights movement, in the peace movement. I became mayor of the city of Burlington when I was 40 years of age and have been more or less an elected official since then.
And what kind of person were you when you were younger?
I was much nicer. The war in Vietnam was a disaster for my generation, and I was one of those who, marched in the streets in opposition to the war. Those are my early political involvements.
Can you break down what your personal political philosophy is?
Yeah, I'm a democratic socialist, and by that, what I mean is that we have got to create a cooperative society where we care about each other, we work for each other. And given all of the technology that is out there right now, we really do, it's not utopian, really do have the capability of providing a decent life for every man, woman, and child. And I spend a lot of my time fighting against the greed of the billionaire class, which has resulted in the top 1% in the world owning more wealth than the bottom 99%. Can you believe that? Top 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 99%. So the challenge that we face, and it's not easy, can we create a society in which everybody has decent paying jobs, healthcare for all, where we combat climate change and bigotry? Can we do it? I think we can. But what motivates me is the need to take on the incredible greed of what I call the oligarchs. People of incredible wealth and power who want even more.
Defining yourself as a democratic socialist, how do you think that affects your appeal to American voters? Do you think they're scared of the term socialist?
I think it works both ways. Obviously, there's some people who say, socialism is communism. He believes in what North Korea is about or what Stalin believed and all that. And there are some people, older people, who accept that nonsense. But I think for younger people, there is an understanding that the system today, the capitalist system, just is not working. They are seeing an economy which is worse for them than for their parents. They are deeply worried about climate change in America. They're paying off college debt. They see racism and sexism and xenophobia and homophobia. In my country, where we have more income and wealth inequality than we've ever had before, you got three people owning more wealth than the bottom half of American society. So they have a sense that the entire system needs restructuring, which is what I talk about. So it works both ways, I think.
As an outsider looking over to the US, it just seems so divided. Why is this, and is it getting worse?
Well, the answer is yes and no. It is politically divided, very divided. That has a lot to do with Trump and the growth of right-wing extremism and Trump's ideology, which is essentially to divide people up. That's how he thinks he wins power. You take on, attack gay people over here, you attack Muslims over here, you attack Mexicans over here, you attack women over here, whatever it may be. And that's one of the reasons, but it's not the only reason. On the other hand, what I will tell you, and what we work on, is on issue after issue, the American people are not divided. People don't know that. Media doesn't report it. But if you say to the American people, whether you're a conservative, Republican, or a progressive, you say, should we demand that billionaires pay their fair share of taxes? People say yes. Should we address the crisis of climate change? People say yes. Should we deal with affordable housing, build more housing? People say yes. So there are areas where there are differences, but ideologically in America, there are fewer differences than some might think.
And on Trump, there's huge concern currently about the memories of Biden and Trump. And, they're both elderly candidates and the frontrunners for the presidency. Do you think there should be an age cap on running for president?
I don't. Once you're into an age cap, then you're into a lot of other, you can develop a lot of other criteria to determine who should be eligible to run or not. Bottom line is you should be able to vote whoever you want. And if age is a concern, or this age of this particular candidate is a concern, don't vote for him or her. But I think what we have got to do as voters is look at the totality of a candidate. You're young, all right? So should somebody say, well, she's young, she doesn't know anything, she doesn't have any experience, I'm not going to vote for her. No, that would be wrong. It just so happens that, Biden has been president now for over 3 years, and he has a pretty good record. Not the world's greatest record. We've had you talked about division, it's hard to get things done. But people should judge him by his record and his age as part of a whole process.
Do you think people are disillusioned, though, when they look at the two candidates?
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree that there are a lot of Americans who are not happy with either candidate. A lot of reasons for that. It's not just age. I think there is a general feeling in the United States that government is not working particularly well for working class people. The truth of the matter is that real inflation accounted for wages today are lower for workers than they were 50 years ago. Can you imagine that? All of the increase in worker productivity and technology, and all that's happening is the very rich are getting much richer and workers are falling further and further behind. People look around them and say, this is really not good. What is government doing for me? And the truth is government is not responding to the pain of the American people. So I think that's the pervasive attitude for many in my country.
And in your opinion, what is the worst case scenario for the election result in 2024?
Well, obviously, I'm going to do everything I can to see that Donald Trump is not elected. And what I want to convey to people around the world, it's not just that Trump is a pathological liar, and he is. In other words, he is somebody, I suspect, who doesn't even know when he's lying. I don't think he knows the difference between truth and lying. It's not just that he's a sexist and wants to deny women the right to vote, that he's a xenophobe, saying horrible things about immigrants. It's not just that he wants to give tax breaks to billionaires and cut programs for working people. It's worse than that. He does not really believe in democracy, and everything he is doing is trying to undermine the faith of the American people in our democracy. And if Trump wins, it will be a disaster not only for the American people, but he will be supporting right-wing governments and right-wing movements all over the world. I mean, that's what they believe, and it's part of an international effort. And I fear, you want my worst-case scenario? I think when we look back historically, modern democracy developed, maybe with the American Revolution and the French Revolution and the spread of, right of people to vote in Europe and so forth and so on. It could be, worst case scenario, that after 250 years of modern democracy, more or less, that we're coming to an end to that, and that the world will increasingly look at autocracy as the form of government that exists.
And Trump is obviously playing a key role in that in the US, but what factors in Europe and society generally can you attribute to the rise of these right-wing ideologies?
I think there are a lot of factors, but I think one is the world is moving and has moved in the last 50 years very, very quickly. Change is taking place. And in that process, a lot of people feel, correctly so, that they have been left behind. So if you're a worker in America and you had a decent job and suddenly the boss comes to you one day and says, I'm sorry, we're shutting down and our plant is moving to China or to Mexico, and you're out on the street, and you go out and you get a job that makes half as much as you used to make, you feel pretty angry about it. If you see the rich getting richer and you're struggling, you feel that that's not quite right. So I think what Trump is picking up on is a lot of the resentment that people feel, often in rural areas. They have been left behind. They're going nowhere in a hurry. In many cases, their kids are even in worse shape, going to have a lower standard of living than they do. And people are saying, why is this happening? And Trump blames immigrants and blames the gay community and blames women or whatever it may be. And there are some people who unfortunately respond to that because, in my view, the Democratic Party has not been anywhere near as strong as it should be in standing up for the working class of the United States.
You mentioned healthcare. The United States is the only wealthy industrialized nation that doesn't offer free healthcare, especially to those who need it the most. Why is this the case, and do you think that will ever change?
Well, I surely hope it will change, and we're working hard to make it change. The American healthcare system is dysfunctional. And what I want to say to our friends here in the UK, if anyone tells you that you want to move in the direction of the United States, forget about it. Don't do it. The function of the healthcare system in America is not to provide quality care to all people. We're the only major country on earth not to have universal healthcare. The function is to make billions in profits for the insurance companies and the drug companies. And that is what's happening. So the major corporations in healthcare are doing phenomenally well. Meanwhile, we are spending as a nation more than twice as much per capita as you spend in the UK, and double what most other countries spend. And yet, we have 85 million people who are uninsured or underinsured, and our life expectancy is actually going down, having started much below many other countries. So the healthcare system is totally broken. We don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough nurses, mental health counselors, pharmacists, etc. And what we need to do is learn from countries around the world, guarantee healthcare as a human right for all people.
You famously memed at the Biden inauguration, which went instantly viral. How does social media intersect with politics? And
It's huge. It's huge. And it works in some ways in a very positive way, where serious discussion can get out to millions of people beyond the corporate media. The corporate media keeps a fairly tight rein on what we can be discussing. And once you're on social media, I think you have a lot more latitude to talk about issues that are of relevance to people that they're not going to see on NBC or ABC or the BBC. That's the good news. The bad news, obviously, is the enormous amount of lies and disinformation that appears in social media that is unchecked. And also, there are a lot of folks out there who look for the clicks. What can we get somebody to say that will get us a lot of clicks, rather than let's have a serious discussion. So just saying something for a second, taking things out of context, but getting clicks is also a danger. But by and large, from my point of view, we use social media a whole lot. It allows us to go beyond corporate media, talking about important issues that otherwise would not be discussed.
And on that meme, do you have a favorite version of it that you've seen?
Oh my God, there's so many of them, it's astounding. But I mean, that's just an example of social media. The idea, it was a cold day. I had my coat on. I had a pair of mittens on. Why is this so extraordinary, right? What would you do on a cold day? But it kind of captured me. And the next thing I know, I came back to the office and my press secretary said, oh, you're not going to believe what's happening right now, you know. But that just speaks to the power of social media. Yes, I was up in the moon and I was every place on earth and beyond.
And looking globally, what is the biggest challenge facing global leaders today? And can you see leaders actually working together to tackle these issues?
There are a number of issues. Number one, I'm chairman of a committee that deals with healthcare. So I want to give you the bad news, is that the pandemic, the terrible pandemic that we have gone through, will likely not be the last pandemic. So what we have to do as a global society is work together to be prepared for the next pandemic. That's number one. Number two, obviously, if the entire planet, that means the United States, China, Europe, India, Russia, do not get its act together in terms of cutting carbon emissions, we're going to see more and more terrible summers like we saw last year, more drought, extreme weather disturbances, flooding, heat waves, and it's only going to get worse. So we have got to work very aggressively to transform our energy systems. You know, Europe is doing its thing, we're doing our thing. And by the way, if Trump is elected, there will be a major setback because he doesn't even accept the reality of climate change. So I would say climate change, pandemics, the need to preserve democracy. Democracy is under assault, not only in the United States, but throughout Europe and elsewhere. Those are some of the global issues that I think we have to deal with.
The world's a really scary place right now, especially for young people who are faced with probably tackling the effects of climate change, war, recession. Do you have any advice for any young individual looking to make a change, large or small, in their community, in their town?
I do. In this sense, the work that I do, you know, when you're involved in government and politics, it is not easy stuff. It really is not. And if you think there's a magic solution, you're wrong. There's not. It's a lot of struggle. How do you bring people together? That's tough stuff. And there are no easy solutions, but we've got to stay at it. And the second thing that I would say is, in that same line of thought, is I talk to too many young people who say, well, I went out on a demonstration, the world did not change, I'm giving up. You can't give up, because the future of the planet is at stake, the future of democracy is at stake, our health is at stake. So what I am suggesting is it ain't easy. Despair is not an option. You can't run away from these issues. They're not going to get better if good people run away from them. You're going to have to jump into whatever area you can. You're interested in issues of war and peace. You're interested in climate. You're interested in women's rights. You're interested in income and wealth inequality. Get involved, roll your sleeves up, and get to work.
And for anyone that is in that state of despair or has lost hope, where do you find yours?
Well, I am very fortunate in that I have a very unusual job. And, most people live within their bubble, if you like, their friends and their family. My job takes me around the entire United States. Occasionally it takes me abroad, here in the UK today. And in that capacity, I meet some extraordinary people. So you come home and you see good people in every walk of life doing wonderful things, brave things. And, you say, wow, this is... When you see that with your own eyes, you don't give up on human beings and the human condition, because you see great people out there. So that is one of the things that keeps me going.
Are you proud to be an American?
I am, in the sense that I'm not proud of what America is doing today in many ways. I'm not proud of Donald Trump being a former president. My father came to the United States at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket. And he was able to create at least a lower middle class, a working class existence. And he was very proud of the opportunities that America gave him. And that is true for millions and millions of people. And I'm proud that, after World War II, the United States helped rebuild Germany and Japan and was helping poor people all over the world. Much to be proud about as an American. On the other hand, much to not be proud about. So I think, we have like every other country, we have a checkered history. The UK has a checkered history. Our job is to move us in the right direction, which is based on the understanding we are a common humanity. The United States is a wealthy country. Our job is to work with countries all over the world to help improve standards of living, democracy, deal with climate, et cetera, et cetera.
And speaking of things to be proud of, in your career, what is the thing that you're the most proud of?
Well, I'm proud that as part of a movement, one of the things you learn about politics is nobody does it all by himself or herself. Nobody. But as part of a political movement in the United States, I think we transformed the definition of what is possible. We have taken on the entire corporate establishment, the political establishment, the media establishment, and many millions of people have responded in various ways, including electing dozens and dozens and dozens of wonderful people to the U.S. House of Representatives. Right now, in the House of Representatives, there are many young members of Congress who are strong progressives. Many of them are women. Many are people of color. They're doing a fantastic job. And that's kind of a result of the political movement we've organized.
Do you have any regrets?
Always. Everyone has regrets, the mistakes that we make. But in general, I'm proud of what I and people who work with me have accomplished.
And if you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Don't be so hard on other people. Sometimes I have a tendency to be a little bit more critical than I should have been.
And what's the main goal you're still hoping to achieve?
Is creating a democratic world, which means not only vibrant democracies where people participate in the political process, but understanding that democracy is more than voting. It means having control over where you work. A lot of people go to work very unhappy about it. They have no power. They're cogs in a machine. Want to change that. We want to free up the human capacity to allow imagination to run free, to create a very, very different world, a world not based on the accumulation of money and greed. And sometimes we don't talk about that. That's the kind of culture that we have got to change. You know, life is more than just, oh my God, I only have $5 billion. He's got 10 billion. How do I get the next 10 billion? I lie, cheat, steal. We can do better than that as human beings.
Young people are sadly the ones that are most impacted economically by what's happening. We've got hundreds of thousands of young people who are entering the labour market for the first ever time, and we know that they're disproportionately working in the industries that are really impacted by what's happening, for example, in hospitality or travel, for example.